The fangs sink in before anyone can react, and the people watching simply wait for him to drop dead. But this attack was just the final note in a much larger disaster. The man was a prisoner named Paul, and he had just emerged from a catastrophic shipwreck where he'd been tossed by hurricane-force winds for 2 weeks. The ship finally broke apart here, on the jagged, rocky coast of the Maltese Islands. The survivors who dragged themselves onto the beach were physically broken, shaking from the cold and soaked by a relentless freezing rain. Escaping the vast, overwhelming violence of the sea often leaves a person entirely depleted and strangely vulnerable to the singular, intimate dangers waiting for them on the shore. Seeing their distress, the local islanders built a large fire. For the freezing survivors, it was a temporary sanctuary from the storm. But that warmth triggered a hidden trap. A venomous viper was coiled deep inside the gathered wood, and as the heat reached it, the snake was forced out of its dormant state. Paul was actively working to keep the sanctuary alive, gathering a bundle of sticks and reaching directly toward the flames. As he laid the wood on the fire, the viper lunged from the heat and fastened its jaws firmly onto his hand. In a cruel irony, the very fire meant to save the survivors had now become the mechanism that delivered a lethal strike to the man who had just escaped the sea. The islanders watched in horror. They knew exactly what kind of snake it was, and they knew what usually happened next. These observers viewed the world through the lens of Dike, the ancient concept of cosmic justice. Their logic was simple. Since Paul was a prisoner who had escaped a wreck, they assumed he must be a murderer. If the ocean hadn't finished him, they believed nature's justice had sent this viper to complete the sentence. This specific moment, where the mythic meets the historical, is captured in the early textual records of the New Testament. When we see a random, brutal accident happen to a stranger, we often instinctively try to assign some kind of moral cause to it, hoping to find order in the chaos. This is what the crowd was waiting for. Usually, a viper's venom moves through the vascular system, triggering rapid swelling and intense pain. They expected to see him collapse into systemic shock. Everyone knew a strike like this was a death sentence. But instead of the expected chaos, Paul remained completely still. His face showed no sign of the pain or panic that should have overwhelmed him. Then, with a simple, effortless motion, he shook the snake off his hand and watched it fall into the consuming fire. True strength isn't always found in fighting back. It's often seen in the ability to maintain absolute internal peace when facing what should be certain destruction. Minutes passed, then an hour. The crowd stood in a heavy silence, waiting for the symptoms that simply never arrived. Paul suffered no harm at all. He had entirely defied the expected biological outcome of the strike. As the realization hit the crowd, their opinion did a complete 180. They stopped calling him a murderer and began whispering that he must be a god. Seeing someone survive what should have destroyed them has the power to instantly rewrite every assumption a society holds about that person's value. But Paul wasn't a god. He was simply a man living under a specific mandate of divine protection that the viper couldn't break. That snake represents the unexpected, venomous attacks we all face, the hidden enemies that wait for us even after we've survived the storm. The lesson of Malta is clear. When you are preserved by a higher purpose, no sequence of disasters has the authority to finish you. If you believe in that resilience for your own life, let us know in the comments. Write "No weapon shall harm me" and subscribe